So I think that it will always be successful to run a disinformation campaign and I mean, let's face it, I wanted to give Kirkpatrick the benefit of the doubt for a long time. I was really hoping he was going to be a J. Allen Hynek, but it has turned out that he's become an Edward Condon. And as you listen to what he says on his media whirlwind tour that he's taking right now, it becomes more apparent to me that he is just bound and determined to explain everything away, which was the task that he was given, the task that J. Allen Hynek was given when he first joined Blue Book, the directive that they were given when they started Project Grudge. It's just repeating itself. And for him to say that there's no data on the Nimitz case is ridiculous. For him to say that the gimbal video is probably just a jet in a far off distance, and he said probably just the jet and this, that, and the other, and he doesn't know. He's just speculating on a easy solution.
All Things Unexplained is free to watch on YouTube and listen to wherever you get your podcasts. If you would like to support our show, you can visit our YouTube store. Additionally, you can find us on Venmo under All Things Unexplained. Be sure to check out our website, allthingsunexplained.com. All proceeds from the sales of Dr. Mounce's books on Amazon and Audible also go straight to our show.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers.
We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's.
Did the CIA write Wind of Change by the Scorpions?
As humans busied themselves about the various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied.
Dr. Loeb, what percentage chance do you give it that you have indeed uncovered extraterrestrial or non-human technology?
With infinite complacence, people went about their affairs, yet across an immense ethereal gulf, intellects vast and unsympathetic threw their plans against us.
Prior to your abduction, did you believe in UFOs or any sort of alien life form?
All things unexplained.
So some of that, I think, sir, we'll save for closed session.
The reason that we are all here tonight is our friend Dan Warren is joining us. He has become the go-to guy for all UFO, UAP news. Dan, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you for such a wonderful title and introduction. Thank you.
Before you send that next hot take up there, Tim, for those of you that are listening live, if you have a question for Dan or for any one of us, I suppose, we are going to do listener questions next. So put those in all caps so that we can pull those into our show. Back to you, Tim.
And we're doing our Area 51 Coffee Company hot takes. And I'm so happy you brought up the Patterson-Gimlin film, Dan, because we had a previous Bigfoot guest on the show who did not want to talk about the Patterson-Gimlin film. And I couldn't help but think, but wait a minute, I'm not sure that you and the things you're associated with would even exist without the Patterson-Gimlin film, to be honest. So I was a little confused by that. I want to ask you, Dan, what your hot take on what we like to think of as the keystone event of ufology, and that is the Roswell incident, 1947.
So the thing that I've brought up a few times that I haven't heard anyone else talk about is they take pictures of the debris a few days later of what looks like aluminum foil, and they're saying this is a weather balloon. So if you research a weather balloon, it's got aluminum foil or plastic type skin on it. But one thing that's there in all weather balloons is a payload. What attaches the payload to the balloon is the most durable, strong piece of the entire assembly, which is a cable of some form. Nowhere in any of the descriptions of the Roswell wreckage do they talk about a wire or a rope of some sort. You would see a big long wire rope in the debris field because it would stay together. It wouldn't break up into a million pieces. It would be the biggest thing that they would pick up. And no one's ever mentioned that in any of the reports that I've seen. So to me, that says, obviously they just grabbed some skin, some aluminum foil, and threw it on the ground and took pictures in front of it. And that's how they were trying to cover it up. but the original newspaper release was probably legitimate. And then they turned around and tried to cover it up with the debunking of it the very next day by deflating the balloon.
Yeah, and you know what? I actually had the opportunity to go to Roswell recently, and I ended up at the actual crash site, digging in the desert. It was literally like a scene out of Breaking Bad as I'm sitting at a rendezvous point by myself with no cell service, waiting on people I barely know to supposedly come pick me up and take me out there. But they did show up. They did take me out there. We had a metal detector, and we did find anomalous material in the desert that I'm hoping to do a future show on. And some of it I can only describe, Dan, as anomalous metallic stuff like that. I don't have any other way to put it. It was just an amazing, remarkable place. Dan, I wanted to know your hot take on this. Has been quite contentious, the most recent Arrow report. And I think I have my favorite headline about the Arrow report here. No proof the U.S. government knows anything about UFOs, says the U.S. government. What's your hot take on the Arrow report, Dan?
So I think there is value in the Arrow historical report. It does provide a decent timeline of government involvement in the investigation. But what I think is more telling is who they wrote it for. And you can tell who they wrote it for by what they didn't include in it. If you go to the congressional hearings, Representative Gallagher asked about the Wilson Davis notes, and he handed it to them and to enter it in the congressional records. And he said, I can't vouch if this is true or not, but I want you guys to help me find out if it is. They didn't mention it at all. Representative Luna got up and said, I want to know what's at the end of the gimbal footage where it cuts out. What happens after it cuts out? They didn't mention the gimbal footage in there either. Anything that is relevant to the UFO conversation that we tend to be talking about right now was not included in that report, which leads me to believe that it was written for Pentagon leadership as the target audience or at the behest of Pentagon leadership. And they completely ignored the directives given to them by the elected officials to do a thorough historical research on the UFO topic at large. So to me, this is a clear-cut case of this is bought and paid for by the Pentagon, so you're going to write it the way that we want to write it. Don't listen to those representatives and give them what they're asking for. Do what we tell you. That's what I think that report represents.
I think that's a really accurate description. We had Kevin Knuth on with us the other night, physicist, and they briefed Arrow on UAPs, and nowhere in the report, right? Nothing from any. And matter of fact, the Arrow report and Sean Kirkpatrick said there are no studies suggesting that this phenomenon is anomalous, which is not true, because Kevin Knuth literally wrote a study talking about how incredibly anonymous the Tic Tac UFO encounters with the Nimitz and others were. So very interesting. And my last hot take for you before I think we're going to move on to some listener questions, Dan. You said you're going to contact in the desert. What UFO celebrities are you going to golf with?
Oh man, if golfing is not my strong suit, I'll caddy. I'll caddy the bag for Richard Dolan. That's who I would like to meet.
Nice.
George Knapp is going to be there, and me and him have been friends on Twitter for a while. I got to meet him at the congressional hearings for 30 seconds, but that's the guy that I want to hang out with just because he seems like a cool dude. I'd like to get him in a relaxed setting and just chat with him a little bit there. But those would be my big two. But you need four for a golfing outing now that I think about it. So let me think. Danny Sheehan's going to be there as well. So maybe I could pick his brain a little bit.
Yes, Danny Sheehan, that would be good. And did you say Gary Nolan? Is he going to go out there with you?
I don't think he's going to be there. Not a contact in the desert. I don't think he's on the list of speakers.
Oh, that's too bad. Maybe you can get Avi out there with you. Or Jaime Musan, do you think is he going to be there? I wonder.
Do you think Avi Loeb would golf in his tweed coat?
Definitely.
He could sew patches on the elbows of a blazer. I'm sure he'd be all right.
Do you think he's watched Caddyshack?
No,
that's what we should do.
He doesn't strike.
We should watch Caddyshack live with Avi Loeb one night. So I think you're right, Dad. I don't think he's seen Caddyshack. You know, I have to bring this up. I'm sorry.
Oh
You know,
boy,
we were
here
going
we
to go
go.
listener questions, but what's your hot take on the alien mummies? I have to ask now.
I
And I
don't
shouldn't
give
laugh.
it I don't give it any legitimacy due to the fact that it's been debunked at some point in the past, at least some of them. There are videos, there are things associated with the discovery of it that I find intriguing, but I'm not ready for my needle to move past the 50% mark yet on them. And I also always caution people, like, just because it's something that is foreign to us, that is alien to us, doesn't mean that it's extraterrestrial in nature. If you look at the Paracas elongated skulls, if you saw one of those things walking around with a head that was 1.5 feet longer than ours, or however long, I'm over exaggerating, we would think that's an alien, but it's not. It's something from this earth. So it could be just another species or another branch of life on earth that was yet to be discovered until now. And we're just discovering that there's another species that has similar build to us. The Homo naledi was discovered by Lee Berger just a few years ago and has been brought up to prominence because they use fire, they use tools, they left markings on their cave walls. The Denisovans are another branch of humanity that we only have a few fragments of them, like a molar and a pinky finger or something like that, for us to know that they were bigger than us, that they were more robust than us, that they lived a longer life as a civilization than us. The Boscott people, we know that their heads had a larger cranial capacity than us. So what's to say that we don't discover another humanoid type creature on the earth that is from here? It's native to here. So don't jump to extraterrestrial so quickly, I guess is what I'm saying. But I'm not confident in the authenticity of the mummies.
Right. And you know what? We've had physicists tell us that the evidence suggests it's much more likely that NHI, non-human intelligences, are just here. They just live here, because it would be so difficult to even control UFOs from somewhere else in space, not to mention the fact of just showing up on a routine basis from far away in the universe. So, and it would be quite difficult, you know, Dan, even if we did discover aliens or extraterrestrial technology, it would be quite difficult to determine that indeed is what it is, because we've had physicists tell us, you know what, we've got the same elements and even the same isotopes throughout the entire universe. So even if you had extraterrestrial technology in front of you, it would still be kind of interpretive as to what exactly you're looking at. Great input, Dan. Do you have anything else to say about that?
While we're on that, like, if you look at the research that's come out recently, octopi are right on the verge of being considered an extraterrestrial species that through transpermia has developed on this planet as well. So that, like, the water got here to Earth somehow. It wasn't built, or the Earth wasn't formed with the water. It had to come somewhere. If anything was trapped in the ice and survived the trip here, it would be what populated the Earth. So who's to say that doesn't continue to this day, that maybe there's a meteor, right, that brings ice with it, that brings some type of virus or something that morphs and turns into something like an octopus that you'll see in our oceans right now. It's very, very foreign to our interpretation of what we expect to see as far as life goes.
It is foreign.
Oh, yeah.
They're very strange.
The way you just described it reminds me of another movie CJ's probably never seen, The Thing, the classic movie.
I mean, you could list every movie you know, and I haven't seen it.
Right. So shout out to all our listeners tonight. We're on YouTube and X/Twitter tonight. We really appreciate you. Please hit the subscribe button, comment, like, and share if you can. We're talking to Dan Warren tonight from the Fifth Pillar of Emphasis, and we've got a few listener questions tonight for you, Dan.
Before you ask me questions, I get to ask one of CJ's movie knowledge.
Oh boy.
One of the best space documentaries of all time. So you had to have seen this movie. Have you ever seen Spaceballs?
I have seen Spaceballs. Yes.
I knew it.
What the heck?
But I haven't seen Star Wars.
Yeah, it pales in comparison to Spaceballs.
Was it Pizza the Hut? That was a good
Yes.
Yeah, I saw Space Oz a long time ago. It's been a long time, but I do remember thinking that it was quite funny, and thinking that it was quite funny even though I had never seen Star Wars, or it's based on Star Wars, right? Or Star Trek?
Yes.
Star Wars,
Star
yeah.
Wars.
Yeah.
Sports.
I've got a quote from a sci-fi movie that she has seen.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick
And I know.
all out of bubblegum.
So she actually has seen They Live with Rowdy Roddy Piper. So I am really disturbed, CJ, though, that you have seen Spaceballs and not 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah, I'll work on it. I'll put it on my list. of
Or Star
things
Wars.
to watch.
How do you watch the parody but not the thing that got parodied?
I don't know. It was forced to watch it. I think I just need to take a 3-day weekend and watch all of these things back to
Watch The Abyss. Start with that one.
Start with The Abyss.
That's the one that's the movie that I believe is going to have more and more significance as we continue to delve into the UFO topic, and we transition from looking at things in our skies to looking at things in our seas.
Okay, I'm writing it down just for you.
Oh,
The
yeah.
Abyss.
And
we really
go to my TikTok, because I've got 2 videos that I made, one about the Abyss movie, and then there's online. There is a backstory for the non-terrestrial intelligence that describes a species that lived 22 million light years away. They came down to observe Earth from behind the moon in secret, and then they eventually went into the oceans, where they were more comfortable with the pressure, the crushing pressure of our ocean depths, because they came from a water world as well. So that's their natural habitat. And that's why they thrived in the depths of our ocean. And that's the backstory James Cameron put together for the movie Abyss. And once you hear the backstory,
James Cameron movie.
Yes, it's phenomenal. And once you know the backstory, it makes it even better.
All right. And now I have to get on TikTok so that I can see that.
That's for sure.
I have a lot to do this upcoming weekend.
Yeah, you do.
Not to mention, we've got Brandon Fugel from Skinwalker Ranch coming on our show. We have an episode with him next week. Somebody had a question in here that I saw about Brandon Fugel, so we better dive into
I hope you start it.
Yes.
If you can start anything that I haven't already, CJ, for our listener questions.
And real quick, a shout out to Christian Morales and Mandolin 14 and UFO Busters, that UFO show in Australia, all for your wonderful comments and chiming in on the conversation here. We would love to hear from anybody that's listening live. All right, let's get into those questions, Tim.
And I know you're going to hate me, but I'll just say this before we do the listener questions, because I have to, because you brought up the USOs, Dan, and this blew my mind. Kevin Knuth the other night with me, he said, hey, you know what? My organization, UAPX, we addressed Arrow. We made a presentation to Arrow, and we made a presentation to the House Armed Services Committee and several other 3-letter organizations. That's what he said. And he said at every presentation, they asked us, what are our capabilities of observing or detecting UAPs underwater? At every one of them. That information just makes you go, I think that water and this UFO phenomenon has something, connected there. So we've got a few questions here.
And don't forget that we are on a water world ourselves. We are a 70% water coverage of the Earth. So when you view us from a great distance away, just like they did with, I think, the Mercury Voyager back in the 70s or early 80s, there's a famous photograph called the pale blue dot, and that's us. We are just a little blue dot in the middle of a dark sky, and we are a water world. And there's more water than there is land, and who knows what we're going to learn as we go forward. We've learned about our air domain awareness gap because of the balloons. Imagine what we're going to learn in our water domain awareness gap if we start looking underneath the surface of the seas.
That's so true. We really appreciate all our listeners right now. And we have a question from listener 2, Jax. Dan, craft retrieval. This is a great question. If they are so advanced and way ahead of us, why don't NHI, that's non-human intelligences, get there and retrieve their craft before us?
I'm guessing, just to make sure everyone understands, this is pure speculation. maybe it's not as valuable to them as it is to us. Maybe it's dispensable. Like if you lose a Walmart bag, is that going to be something you chase down the road and recover, or is it significant enough to them and their mission to go and retrieve it? I understand the question he's asking, and it's a good one. But I have heard that they have come back to retrieve the individuals, but I don't know if they would do that as a general rule of thumb. Do we go and recover every piece of military equipment that we lose overseas? We don't. There's still planes, there's still advanced military tech overseas right now, and we just don't go get it all. And why don't we go get it all? Like, so that's probably similar to the same reasons why they don't go get it all. Maybe they do more than we even know.
True.
Sometimes
And you know what,
we
too?
actually blow it up, blow our own equipment up. So
Yeah, and you know what, too, Jax? I just have to point out, if you'll check out American Cosmic by Diana Pasulka, she says that we've been told that some of these UFO crashes are actually donations or gifts from the NHI to us. So now, what are they getting back? Well, that remains to be seen, and that's totally up for some disturbed speculation. Dan, we have.
Hey, this is my
Go
job,
ahead.
by the way.
Sure.
But also,
What?
NHI, for people
yeah,
who might
sorry,
be new
CJ.
to the topic, is non-human intelligence, for those of you who don't know what that term is. So, okay, this is from UFO Busters, that UFO show Australia. Dear Dan, have you seen any of my UAP recordings from my library? Well, let's put him on the spot here. I'd love your opinion. Would be super cool.
He probably needs some background on that. UFO Busters is one of our great fans in Australia, out in the middle of nowhere, and they have a great YouTube channel where they document all the anomalous things that they see in the sky.
I can't say I have, but that goes back to my previous comment where I don't actually look at a lot of videos. I tend to read more than look at videos at this point in my journey. And you change over the course of time as you're investigating this topic based on where you come into it. I'm an engineer. I'm a nuts and bolts guy by nature. I've had to transition from being purely nuts and bolts to thinking more along the lines of the consciousness aspect of the phenomenon as well. To me, the videos, I don't watch a lot of them. So I'm sorry, I had to say I haven't seen your videos, UFO Busters, but I'll be happy to take a look at them. But I can only absorb them. I can't comment on them. I can't tell you much about them. I just don't have that skill set. My skill set is based on trying to connect dots in what's happening now to what has happened in the past and what is out there in the UFO universe that we can use to better understand the significance of the information that we're receiving today.
Well, you're doing your role of disseminating that information well. So thank you for doing that. All right. From Christian Morales, Dan, where do you think we'll be in 5 years with UAP? Do you think government will be more transparent, or will it be up to Brandon Fugel, James Fox, or the Bledsoes?
This has actually been a change in perspective I've had recently. And I'll be honest, Kevin Knuth is one of those guys. It's kind of changed my opinion. So is Avi Loeb. But what we've seen from the government at least 3 times that I've been able to track based on the historical report from Arrow is when they get interested in it, they approach it with an open-minded approach to the topic. The Pentagon leadership comes in and squashes it flat. That happened with Project Grudge. That happened with Project Blue Book when the Condon report came out. And that just happened with the Arrow historical report. So right now, the Pentagon, the government is on full on squash it and extinguish this flame. That's what they're trying to do right now. But that's where the civilians need to start investigating for themselves. That's where we need to engage the masses to say, hey, we want this to be investigated more. We want to learn more about it. We can't just rely on the government at this point. We're going to have to help ourselves at some point. So I do think that it's going to be more on the shoulders of people like Brandon Fugel, James Fox, and the Bledsoes to get actual information out there. That's the thing that I always think about is there's got to be just one case or one event that everyone's going to have to look at some point in the future and go, okay, well, I guess this is legit. Let's dive in. And then that's going to be the tipping point for the conversation.
And we have one more listener question here, CJ.
All right, this comes from Mandolin14. My question for Dan is, what do you think is the best approach to public education via social media, despite the weirdness? Go all out, or do you think there should be a method to the madness?
I try to connect three dots to allow people to do what I call triangulate your thoughts on something. There's one data point that's currently in the news cycle, but if you back up and look at that situation and see if you can find why that's significant in a historical aspect and find two other data points that are related to that topic, it really helps people understand why that current news cycle data point is significant and why it's not just an anomaly. Like, hey, this happened, but did you know back in 2004 there was this Nimitz case where a similar type of object was seen, or a radar recording was reported? So it's not just a standalone incident. It starts to give people context. So I guess that's the overarching thing for me, is you have to provide context for the information that's being delivered. And that helps to reduce the amount of weirdness, because if people think, well, that's the weirdest thing I've ever heard. But then if you say, well, no, in 1952, they overflew Washington, D.C. and was reported on all these things, then it gets rid of some of that weirdness. It gets rid of some of that stigma for it to have the context that it needs to be absorbed.
Wonderful. Thank you, listeners, for those questions. And Dan, where can our listeners go to follow you?
I have an unsuccessful YouTube channel called The Fifth Pillar of Emphasis. I think it's 562. They made me add 3 numbers to it, and they assigned them. I didn't get to pick, but yeah, I'm on YouTube, Fifth Pillar of Emphasis. I'm on Instagram, Fifth Pillar of Emphasis. I'm on TikTok, Fifth Pillar of Emphasis. I'm on Twitter at Hey Look Over There. Look is spelled LUK. That's from 2016, so I can't change that at this point. So,
is there is there a website that they can go to and get to all of your others, or they've got to just find all these?
I think if you go, I think I've got Linktree on my, I can't remember, Linktree on my Twitter page and my Instagram page, as well as my TikTok page. So just look up Fifth Pillar of Emphasis, Dan Warren. My 14-year-old daughter did it at school the other day, and she was like, I looked up Dan Warren, and there was a lot of lawyers and doctors. There was none of you.
Dan Warrens out there, yeah.
Yeah, but then the Fifth Pillar of Emphasis, Dan Warren, she's like, and then you were everywhere. So you can find me on Google. That's probably the easiest way to do it.
Oh, yeah, and we have some breaking super chat here. Thanks so much to Christian Morales for the super question on the super chat, which is now available right next to the comment bar in our YouTube. And Dan, listener Christian Morales, I'll let you take that, CJ.
Dan, let's say 2023 was 1952 and 2024 is 1953. Think of UFO history. Would a disinformation effort be successful in 2024?
Would a disinformation effort be successful in 2024? Oh, of course. Like, disinformation is basically always going to be successful, because you mix lies in with the truth, accurate information with the inaccurate information, and you can't distinguish one from the other. That's just a age-old tactic. The best place to hide a truth, or the best place to hide a lie, is between two truths. So I think that it will always be successful to run a disinformation campaign, and I mean, let's face it, I wanted to give Kirkpatrick the benefit of the doubt for a long time. I was really hoping he was going to be a J. Allen Hynek, but it has turned out that he's become an Edward Condon. And as you listen to what he says on his media whirlwind tour that he's taken right now, it becomes more apparent to me that he is just bound and determined to explain everything away, which was the task that he was given, the task that J. Allen Hynek was given when he first joined Blue Book, the directive that they were given when they started Project Grudge. It's just repeating itself. And for him to say that there's no data on the Nimitz case is ridiculous. For him to say that the gimbal video is probably just a jet in a far off distance, and he said probably just a jet and this, that, and the other, and he doesn't know. He's just speculating on a easy solution, and they want to recreate it in the lab instead of going out and finding the full video that was truncated. They are not going to do that. They're not trying. So it seems apparent to me that he's not helping out the conversation.
Recreate it in a lab? The Nimitz case?
He wants to, not the Nimitz, the gimbal. He said, well, if you take it's a lens glare artifact from a jet that's a long way away, so we're going to go in a lab and recreate that thing. And it's like, don't do that. go find the full video and watch the full thing.
Yeah.
It'll tell on itself. You don't need to go into a lab. And I'm a firm believer that just because you can replicate something in a controlled environment that looks very similar to something else, it doesn't, like, you can make a Nazca mummy out of cake. We all seen those memes. That doesn't mean that that's Nazca mummy is made out of cake. It's not the same thing as
Right.
what happened.
That's too funny, Dan. When we did a live news show on Halloween, and all Tim wanted was for us to have a mummy cake to cut into at the show. I talked him out of it. You're all welcome. I talked him out of it.
But that was the part she was most opposed to, because I thought that we should go as Lizzie Borden, which obviously CJ is a perfect fit for, and I would be one of Lizzie's victims. So I thought, but she wouldn't do that. Instead, we went as Scully and Fox Mulder. So, and shout out
Solid
to
selection.
It still worked out pretty good. And even though CJ's never watched the X-Files, just saying.
Yeah.
Shout out to
You need to get on that for sure.
UFO hostess cred diminishing. Shout out to Mandolin14 for the super sticker on YouTube. And I could tell you that actually on YouTube, it is a little green dude giving a giant thumbs up. It's not showing on here, but thank you so much for that, Mandolin. We really appreciate that. Oh, very interesting. Diana checked out some of the UFO Busters stuff. That's quite interesting. And Christian Morales says, but 2024, we got social media phones and many other things we didn't have back in the day. So I think this is referring to his question about the disinformation and the psyops, but I think it'll be a slow for people to accept UFOs as a reality. I tend to agree with that too. Dan, I wanted to ask you about religion. We didn't really get into it, but you kind of headed that way a little bit, because when you were talking about your own experience from what Lou Elizondo was talking about, when you saw that, to me, it sounded like a religious experience that you were having. And Diana Pasulka talks about this sort of thing in her books. And I grew up religious, and and Smitty's our religious expert, and we feel like, you know what? A lot of people think thousands of years ago that otherworldly beings did come directly here and give us some things and tell us some things to do and talk to us. And you know what? Some people either went along with it or some people didn't.
Yeah, I'll clarify that I don't think I was having a religious experience when I was listening to the Lou Elizondo comments. I think that was
What?
that was definitely playing to my I'm a history aficionado. I've always been a fan of ancient megalithic structures, ancient lost civilizations, and those are opportunities that I missed. I wish I was around to help build the pyramid. Am I currently working on something that's as significant, if not more significant, than the pyramids for humanity as a whole? That's kind of why it resonated with me so much. Is this my opportunity to be involved in something that has significance for the entire human civilization as a whole that I can participate in? And I also like to think about this as one of the few opportunities that humanity has that will then allow us to look at ourselves. Like I'm a Tennessee. People in Cookeville know that I'm a Cookevillian. People outside of my town or outside of my state, people in Kentucky just know me as a Tennessean. People outside of in Canada just view me as an American. It's people outside of this earth are going to view me as a human. Like we're all human. We're all the same. This is one thing that could bring us together and help us realize that all of human history is all of our shared human history. We're all part of the one branch of this life form that we know. All the accomplishments that have been accomplished by our forefathers, we should all enjoy and relish and appreciate their accomplishments. There's so much stuff going on in ancient India and ancient China that we have very, very little understanding of, very little knowledge of. The more we discover about it, the more I hope that people realize that great things were going on a long time ago all over the world, and we should all celebrate what happened in the past, because we all are part of that same mix, that same line of life. We're all part of the same thing. That's one of the things that I hope that comes from this. UFO topic, at least.
You know what you just said brought up a memory from one of our favorites. Rest in peace to Jimmy Buffett. And who's the guy from Mississippi, Smitty, that is in the Jimmy Buffett band? Redheaded guy. Dan, you might know.
I can't think right now about it.
You don't think I know?
CJ?
No, I don't know.
I don't know. Well, he wrote the song that Kenny Chesney sung, and what Dan just said made me think of, I'm an old Cookvillian, I'm an old Tennessean. But anyway.
We might have lost sponsorship with you singing.
What in the world just happened?
That was I'm an old Mississippian. Anyway, back to you, CJ.
Oh, yes. You know what your topic reminded me of is when I read the Book of Joy, which was with the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. And they talked a lot about how we are all human brothers and sisters. And if we could all just see that, what a more beautiful world we would live in. I try to teach my children that every single day. We're all human brothers and sisters in this together.
Kind of reminded me
agree.
of the History Channel, The Story of Us. How it just builds one on top of the other.
Yes.
To bring us. Well, of course, I'm a history teacher, so each and every generation has built upon generations of the past and has brought us to the current state we're in, and that we can't forget about what happened in the past, or we can't really truly understand the present. Of course, a lot of people try to wipe out the past, but it's there.
He who has the power controls the past. All right, well, speaking of the History Channel, we've got a big month at All Things Unexplained. We've got Brandon Fugel coming on. We can't wait to ask him all of the questions about the mysteries of Skinwalker Ranch. Please send us your questions. We want to know, why won't they dig into that mesa? We're going to find out. We're going to dig into that. We also have the hosts of a brand new History Channel show coming onto our podcast very soon. More info coming out about that. I'm going on with Nikki Starchild on Wednesday, the Alien Girl 111 podcast. I can't wait to chat with her. It's a big month. We are so thrilled that we had Dan on for this evening. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to DJ who was here with us earlier, to all of our followers, listeners, commenters. You are appreciated more than you will ever know. I know that Dan feels the same way about his listeners, followers. So thank you for being part of our family as we traverse this universe together. Smitty, throwing it your way to send us on out.
Thank you for listening. Be happy, be strange, and listen to All Things Unexplained. Good night from all of us.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you guys for having me. Thank you guys for listening.
All Things Unexplained.
What's your hot take on Travis Taylor?
I've got an exclusive for you guys if you want it about the Alaska.
We do.
Okay.
Dr. Taylor was revealed to be the chief scientist of the UAP task force with the Pentagon.
So some of that, I think, sir, we'll save for closed session.
All Things Unexplained is free to watch on YouTube and listen to wherever you get your podcasts. If you would like to support our show, you can visit our YouTube store. Additionally, you can find us on Venmo under All Things Unexplained. Be sure to check out our website, allthingsunexplained.com. All proceeds from the sales of Dr. Mounce's books on Amazon and Audible also go straight to our show.